Hello and welcome. So in this lesson we're going to do it slightly different. So we're going to try and create a times table program. But what I'm going to do is try and get you guys to work it out first. So just spend maybe 20 minutes trying to work out based on the code that we already have. So using things like print statements, variables, while loops, inputs, and just put all those things together so that you can create something that makes a times table. So I will get you to pause the video in just a minute, but let's have a look. So the idea with this one is we're making the computer do the work. So if a user inputs, say he wants to know the 4 times table, they type in 4 and then the computer generates the 12 iterations. So from 0 times 4 equals 0, and then 1 times 4 equals 4, and so on all the way to 12. And the computer would do all of that, and then at the end you'd print out a nice message. So your mission, using what we've learned over the past 6 lessons, is to try and make a simple program. This can be achieved very simply over just about 15 lines of code, or you could try and write it in a more difficult way, not difficult, but a longer way, just using if statements or print statements and working it that way. So I really want you to explore the possibilities of how to write this code, get the user to input a number, and then from that number it generates the 12 iterations of the times table. So just pause the video now and have a go at that, and when you come back and you unpause the video, I will show you my solution, okay? So my solution isn't necessarily the best one. I'm sure there's 100 different ways of doing this, and I'm sure you guys have got your own versions, which is great. And remember that there's no wrong or right answer. As long as the user can input a number and then output, and the output is the times table of 12 iterations, that's pretty much what we want. But this is another way of doing it. So the first thing I'm going to do here is create the file for it, so making the times table app. So make sure you've got that first, and then head on over to Python. So the first thing we need to do then is I'm just going to label it what it is. So times table app or program, whatever you want to call it. So the first thing is let's just print and tell the user what's happening. So let's just say hello and welcome to my times table app, and then let's close that. So the next line then is we could just say something like print something. So we need it to kind of say, right, what do you want it to do? Now this is very difficult because in the times table, if you was to write times table 2 times 3 equals 6, you'll notice that the value that the user puts in is this one here. So it's a 3 times table. So the next one would be 3 times 3 equals 9. So it's this value. So I would always class this one here as the first number and this one as the second number, and then obviously this one as the answer. So this is where it might seem a bit weird if you didn't know what I'm actually aiming for. So the user is obviously going to specify the times table type, okay? So let's put that in next. So the times table type is, so let's call this number 2, and that's our variable, and then we want it as an input. So we're just going to say, what should we say, type a number from 1 to 12. Let's just put some arrows there, and let's put space at the end so visually it looks better. Now there is one problem with this, is the user will put it in, but the number it's creating will be a string, and in order for Python to do the calculations, it actually needs to be an integer. So there is a function called int, and it looks like that. So it's just int and then brackets, and that will turn this into an actual string. So turn it into that, okay? And that's its mission. In order to get that to work properly, we need to take this bracket this one at the end, and we need to put it around the input. So now it basically says whatever the user puts, turn it into an integer. So if you were to write from or the word 12, it would say nope, and it would give you a massive error. Okay, we can do error checking, and we can kind of do a loop until we get the right answer. But actually, for this one, I just want to make it simple, so we're not gonna do any error checking at this particular moment. But I just want to say, look, it wants to be an integer, and that way that I can actually make it do a calculation. I want the user to input it, and it wants to be a number from 1 to 12. Okay, so that's number 2. Now, number 1 is the actual iteration over them. So you can start at 1 if you want, but for this one, I'm just going to start at 0 because it just makes so much more sense to me. And then we can just do one more variable to kind of iterate over it. Now, mostly I use current for this. And what current does is it just allows you to iterate over it. So when the while loop finishes, current will be at 12 or 13. Okay, but to make it a bit more visually pleasing, we're just going to call it times table, and that just basically says that's the end of the times table. Oopsies. Okay, so those are the main variables. We still need an answer variable, but the problem with answer is if you put it here, it won't always work. So the answer actually needs to be part of the loop itself. So this is one of those times when putting it above the loop would probably cause you a couple of issues, and you might need to use a global variable, but we're not quite there yet, so I'm not going to introduce that just yet. But just to say, we still need to put the answer there, and there's a couple of ways of generating the answer, and I'll just show you my most preferred way. So let's create the while loop. So while times table, just make sure you spell that right, is less than 13, do the following bit of code. Now at the very end, we need to make sure it iterates over it. So we say times table equals or assigned to times table plus 1. So every time it goes round this loop, it will actually just do something. It will do it. So if I put inside of this, if I put print and then just the word hello, what you should see is that it will print that word hello 13 times. So let's just make sure everything's working. So we run the module, and all being well, it will print the word hello 13 times. After I've typed the number, of course. And then it says timetable is not defined, so it means I've spelt it wrong. And it's always a good time to do error checking right now, just to make sure that there is no problems. So you can see straight away the way I've spelt times table is wrong, and had there been more code, that would have caused me so much effort later on to try and work out what it was. But just to see that I missed the S, which seems to be a common occurrence for me. But let's run it again, and let's just make sure as we see it, everything is working as we'd expect. So there we go, there's our 13. So just make sure, or it should be 12. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So, yes, no, it should be 13 because it's at 0. Okay, good. So we can get rid of the hello, and we've just tested everything. We've made sure it works. So now let's start putting our information in. So this is where we're going to initiate answer. So every time it goes through, it will get an answer. And we want answer to do a very simple calculation. We want to say number 1 times number 2. So that should give us the calculation. And now let's just make sure that works. So we just say print, and in its most basic form, we've just created a times table. So this will give you the answer for all of those times table, because we've said, look, what's the answer to number 1 times number 2? Actual fact, at the moment, it will always be the same because we haven't iterated number 1. So shall we iterate number 1 first? Yes. Let's just iterate number 1 first. So let's say number 1 assigned to number 1 plus 1. Okay, so number 1 is basically when it says 0 times 3 equals 1 times 3 equals 2 times 3 equals, and so on. So now that should iterate over that, and it should give us the actual number that we want. And it will go up in ones, or it will go up, actually it will go up how I want it to. So let's see this, because it's user defined. Here we go. So let's say the 3 times table, so it should be 0, 3, 6, 9, so on. 0, 3, 6, 9, and there you go. So we basically got our times table. So in its most functional or fundamental, it now works. That's everything we need. But visually, it doesn't look too pleasing. And if I bought this app, I'd be like, what? And I really wanted to say 0 times 3 equals 0. 1 times 3 equals 3. 2 times 3 equals 6. You know, just like the kids do. So let's make that happen. So we can get rid of print because we've checked that everything works. So let's, and it has to come before here. If it comes after, it won't work. So here we say print, and then we're going to concatenate all of the stuff that we need. So we can say number 1, comma. So it's just going to display number 1 at that point, and then we'll have a string for the times table, and then comma number 2, comma, and then we want equals, and then comma answer. Okay, and that should be it. So we've got number 1, so that will show us this 0 first. Number 2, so it will show us whatever the users put in, and then it will show us the answer based on this there. And as it goes around, because we've iterated this number, it will move it through. So what should happen is this number should change each time, this number should change each time, but this one will stay the same because we haven't iterated that, we haven't done anything with it. And we've also told the times table to go up, so it will stop. It won't cause an infinite loop, because once it hits 13, it will just stop, and that'll be it. So, all being well, this is our times table app, and we've managed to do that in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines of code. So let's just run it, make sure it works before we get too smug about it. So 9 lines of code, 7 times table, and voila. How cool is that? So let's just do one more line of code, because 10's a good number, and just tell the user that it's over, it's finished. So we're just going to say print, and then we'll say something like, and that's your, oops, and then put their number in, number 2 times table, 2 times table, yeah. There we go, that should work. And that's your 2 times table, yeah. So let's run that and see how we got. So 10 lines of code, and we've got quite a nice little functional thing going on here. So it says, which one do we want? So let's do the 12 times table. And it says 1 to 12, but in actual fact, if I put 160, it would give me my 160 times table. So I can literally have any times table I want, which is great. So get that inputted. If you've got your own version, save that as version 1, and then save this as version 2. And we'll kind of develop this idea, and we're just trying now to use all of the stuff we know in different ways. So well done today, and I'll see you in the next lesson.